Hey guys, it's Greg with Apple Explained, and today we're going to explore the history of Apple gaming. This topic spans a couple of decades and a lot of different products, since Apple's approach to gaming has always been very unique compared to other players in the industry. This topic was second place winner of last week's voting poll, and if you didn't get to vote, make sure you're subscribed. That way the voting polls will show up right in your activity feed, and you can let me know which video you'd like to see next. But before we begin, I want to thank iMobi for sponsoring this video and mention how they're making file management across cloud accounts much more seamless. You probably have accounts with Dropbox, Google Drive, and iCloud Drive, but keeping track of your files on each account can become quite frustrating, and transferring files across cloud accounts is even more time consuming. But with AnyTrans for Cloud, you can search through all your cloud accounts and transfer files between them within one application and one login. And the best part is, you can get started with AnyTrans for Cloud today for free, just by clicking the link in the description. So today I'm going to talk about Apple's history with gaming. This history spans a couple of decades and a lot of interesting subjects, and gaming through Apple looks a lot different than gaming through other major companies. We're going to start from the beginning here, and I've got a lot to cover, so let's dive in. Apple began its foray into gaming right from the start. In 1974, Steve Jobs was working for Atari as a night shift engineer when he was asked to help create a prototype for the game Breakout. He enlisted the help of his friend Steve Wozniak, and from here Apple was born. The two went on to develop a prototype for the Apple I computer and founded Apple Computer on April Fool's Day of 1976. The Apple I computer was released in July 1976, funded mostly by the sale of Jobs' VW microbus and Woz's HP 65 calculator. This computer came as an assembled motherboard and was TV compatible, a novel concept at the time. A year later, Jobs and Woz released several cassette-based games for the Apple I, including Lunar Lander and a Star Trek and Mini Star Trek game. The Apple I was a pretty important step for home computing and computer gaming, but bigger and better things were right around the corner. Don't forget that Jobs started Apple while working for Atari. That gaming influence was never far behind him. In 1977, the Apple II was released and made waves around the world. At this point, Atari's influence on Jobs was pretty obvious. The Apple II was marketed as a home computer that was not only good for work, but ready to play. It was designed in part to allow gameplay for Breakout, at the time written in BASIC, and included color graphics, a speaker, and even circuits for paddle controllers. This was a major step for personal gaming, and game designers around the world started to take notice. Eventually, developers designed a whole range of games, accessories, and upgraded storage technology for the Apple II, Apple II Plus, Apple IIe, and Apple IIc computers. Games of the next 10 years included text and graphics-based adventures like Mystery House, RPGs and dungeon crawlers like Castle Wolfenstein and Ultima, sports games like John Madden Football, and a whole range of other beloved pixelated games that users fondly remember from the DOS era. The Apple II GS was released in 1986, which featured a powerful 16-bit microprocessor and started to wipe out graphics and audio competition from companies like Atari and Commodore. At this point, it seemed like building computers in the Apple II tradition of ready for work and play was going to remain the focus of the company. Soon, however, Apple would turn its attention away from the Apple line to focus on Macintosh, and its approach to gaming took a turn also. Just as soon as computer gaming became popular, problems started to pop up with cross-platform software compatibility. Even in the 1990s, Apple was suffering from the shelf space problem. Because Windows offered such a bigger share in the market for gaming software, stores were reluctant to give more space to Mac games. Although Macintosh was the exclusive platform at the release of some incredibly popular games like Myst in 1993, it was never long before they were offered for Windows and no longer linked with Apple branding. Apple needed a new approach to gaming if it was going to keep up with market competitors. Enter the Apple Bandai Pippin. In 1996, Apple released its first and only gaming console. The console ran CDs and came complete with a wireless controller and internet connectivity, which was pretty impressive for the time. At its release, there were 18 games available, including titles like Gundam Tactics, Mobility Fleet 0079, Mr. Potato Head Saves Veggie Valley, and Compton's Interactive Encyclopedia. But for all its unique features, the Pippin was a complete mess. First, it cost almost $600. Second, its processing power was about half that of other consoles available at the time, and ran slow both online and offline. Apple initially produced 100,000 models, but only 42,000 of them were sold before being discontinued. Today, the Bandai Pippin is almost completely forgotten, but it still costs about $600 to any niche gamer who wants to buy the rare discontinued console. So the Pippin was a failure, but lessons were learned, and Apple began to reconsider its relationship to gaming once again. In 1999, Steve Jobs announced that Apple computers were going to become the best gaming platform in the world. They included better graphics cards, better storage, and faster processors, but Windows was one step ahead. A new approach was needed, and Apple had to either find its niche in the gaming market or give up on the market altogether. Things turned around a little bit with the release of the iPod. Owners of an iPod could play games like Music Quiz, Solitaire, and Brick. In 2006, with the release of iTunes 7, owners of 5th generation iPods were given the option to purchase 9 additional games for their devices. At the start, these came to be known as clickwheel games, with simple graphics designed to be played using the iPod's clickwheel interface. But as iPods became more advanced and adopted better graphics with touchscreen technology, more gaming options became available. Clickwheel games were removed from the iTunes Store in 2011, although download files can be found floating around the internet today. While the originals may be gone, some of these early iPod games like Tetris, Bejeweled, Zuma, and Mahjong were the start of what would become Apple's most marketable experience in the gaming world. As iPods developed, so did the games, and third-party developers like EA and Sega soon started to create new software for users to engage with. Unknown to Jobs at the time, this was the dawning of a new era in gaming, the rise of casual gaming. So at this point, Apple didn't have much to offer the world of gaming. Instead, it offered a few games to the owners of Apple products, a much different model on selling games than pretty much any other company, many of which were producing computers and consoles specifically marketed toward gamers with advanced processing power, high-quality graphics cards, and exceptional sound. But response to the small, low-key games was positive, and a big change in the gaming market was underway. Things got really serious in 2008 when Apple announced the release of the App Store. At the start, the store offered only 500 apps, about a quarter of which were free to download. Unsurprisingly, many of the apps were games in the style of the classic iPod, simple and easy, with a low level of competitiveness. Gaming apps quickly rose to the top of the charts, and the casual gaming era had officially begun. Now, the App Store changed Apple's and the public's relationship with gaming, but it wasn't all for the better. While a lot of the games offered on the App Store cost a few dollars to download and play, many of them were free, and this might seem like a good thing, because truly free games usually are, but a new monetization model of the App Store called in-app purchases opened the door to a new style of gaming that would frustrate users of all levels for years to come. And here's how it works. Most of us have experienced the frustration of downloading a game listed as free, learning the gameplay basics, and getting a few minutes in before running out of some energy resource required to continue playing. And it just so happens that the game developer offers more of that energy for a few dollars. Or maybe you downloaded a game and discovered that the only way to win or make any progress at all is to pay real money for a better weapon, a special area, or a stat boost. The structure of these freemium games gave developers the opportunity to insert paywalls in all kinds of places, mostly after players downloaded and got hooked on the game. The App Store is now full of casual games that may be free to download, but requires quite a bit of money to play in its totality. And unfortunately, the issue has spread beyond casual gaming. Gamers and tech journalists alike have blamed the App Store for the rise of microtransactions in gaming as a whole. While in-game payments from the App Store have made at least $70 million for developers since its 2008 launch, the spread of this model outside of smaller apps has made a lot of people very upset. When Star Wars Battlefront 2 was released in 2017, it was heavily criticized for its pay-to-win structure. Players who spent more money could gain pretty massive advantages over others, and the system was so unpopular that EA had to remove microtransactions completely and rework the system so that purchases were only required for cosmetic upgrades, an approach that many big game developers utilize today with much better reception from fans. Now, whether or not Apple is to blame for the existence of microtransactions in games, it's definitely worked out in their favor. As of 2017, the App Store has 2.2 million apps and over 130 billion downloads. Initially, this casual gaming market was dominated by iPods and later iPhones, but in 2010, the iPad once again shook things up. While tablet gaming has never reached the heights of computers, iPads in the last 8 years have offered a pretty significant option for both casual and serious gamers. The biggest defining feature of the iPad is the large amount of power packed into a small portable device. They were dubbed laptop killers when they were first released, and they've come to replace even desktop computers for many gamers. High-power games like Fortnite, Battle Royale, and Civilization are available and run well on iPads. And accessories like pluggable controllers and keyboards make them just as good as any laptop or desktop for many, but even though iPads are offering a popular gaming platform, they still don't stack up for some. So no matter how much graphics, audio, and processing power Apple products contain, it seems like they're always second best to PC in the market for gaming. Part of this is reputation. Apple has been out of the serious gaming market for a long time, and it's been tough to recover. But another big piece is that, despite the Apple II, Apple has never really been a gaming company, and the meaning of work and play has evolved quite a bit in recent years. For work, Macs have always been the go-to for photographers, publishers, illustrators, and graphic designers, and play took on a more creative meaning as Macs and later iPads became a popular tool for music production and art. All hope is not lost, though. The 2017 Worldwide Developers Conference was a unique one in that speakers dedicated a lot of time to talking about the future of gaming. Apple announced a Metal Graphics API to allow improved, unique game development, which may take some time to catch on with developers, but offers hope for a new era of Mac gaming. But the most important shift in the future of Apple gaming is the introduction of virtual reality and augmented reality technology. Apple has dedicated a lot of resources to developing some of the best augmented reality technology on a mobile platform. In iOS 11, Apple introduced ARKit, which allowed developers to utilize augmented reality in their games and apps, a technology Apple thinks will become very popular in the future. This means that independent developers of all sizes will be able to develop AR games and have them function flawlessly in a macOS or iOS environment. And that's a pretty exciting future for both Apple and the gaming community. So that's the history of Apple gaming, and if you want to vote for the next video topic, don't forget to subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.